Welcome to a segment with Dan McCullough and Doug Ramsey. We're excited to do some throwback on how we both personally got started into music and a little bit of our journey up to hopefully our present day. And, you know, some of our thoughts on how music has changed as we experienced it from, I'm going to say, gosh, telling our ages here. I'm going to say to the late 60s into our current year. So we'll just start there.
Yeah, I'd probably say that's accurate. Probably the late 60s when we probably really started to listen to music on the radio as well as whatever our parents are playing in the house. So right. I think that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right, now with that said, you know, let's get started. I guess I'll start with my first introduction into music. Yeah, it was the 60s. My father bought me and my sister, because we were 2 years apart, and we actually got, you know, parents buy kids musical instruments for Christmas. You know, they do that thing, kind of thing. My dad, I definitely remember he bought my sister and I, and they were actually guitars because you could play them, acoustic guitars. Both had one. And Dan, in his adventurous ways, you know, my dad also bought me a toy machine gun. So, you know, me being the adventurous kind of guy that I was back then, you know, I threw mine up in the air and started firing at the guitar, you know, thinking that I was shooting it. And when it hit the ground, you know, it looked like it had got shot up because it was, you know, blam, you know, shattered. I mean, when I say shattered, I broke it. And so then probably a few days later, I did the same thing with my sister. So that was the beginning of my musical journey. But moving fast forward, you know, that was my first, you know, introducing as far as music goes. And then the first time, you know, James Brown. I think every kid in the 60s, if you were born in the 60s, before the 70s hit, you knew who James Brown was. Everybody was trying to do what they call the James Brown, you know. And
right.
You know, and that was you know, kids in the neighborhood and so forth. And then, you know, you'll fast forward a little bit. The first time I heard the Jackson 5 on the radio in the morning, and I mean, this is true, but I don't know, people do it nowadays. But in the morning at breakfast before you went to school, the radio was on, you know, and you know, it was AM radio. FM didn't exist yet. I don't think FM radio existed or was popular at that point because it was just AM radio. And I Want You Back was on, and didn't even know who these guys were. I thought it was a woman singing because, you know, think about it, a young 11-year-old. I guess he was 11 around that time. I don't know how old he was. And, you know, high voice, you know, and, you know, and I could have been no more than at that time, age 6 or 7, maybe, I think, something like that. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, you know, and then they showed up on the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was actually the song "The Love You Save," which made me be like, wow. And my sister, my oldest sister, you know, she bought, you know, buying these 45s. I kind of digress a little bit for the 45s, and I played that record, "The Love You Save," over and over again. And I also always played the B-side because I wanted to hear all the music. And little did I know that it wasn't the Jackson 5 that I was attracted to. You know, later down in the line, we find out it was session musicians, named most notably the Funk Brothers, you know, and because they had that unique sound, they basically were the Motown sound. You know,
let me interject something since you have the mind or memory of an elephant rather.
Right.
Do you actually remember the B-side of that 45?
Yep. For the Love You Save, the B-side for the Love You Save, I believe, was the Young Folks.
Oh man, all right, my hat's off to you. That's good.
Yeah. And Darling Dear was the B-side to Who's Loving You was the B-side to I Want You Back. That much I do know. Uh, Darling Dear was the B-side to Mama's Pearl. You know,
Okay.
and so but don't get me wrong, I listen to other Motown acts too. But I'm just going to note it. Reason why I'm focusing on those guys because those were kind of almost like our age mates for the most part. They were a little bit older than we were, but basically our age mates for the most part. And and like I
Right.
mentioned about getting instruments at Christmas. Then one year, my sister's 2 years older than me got an organ. Don't ask me why. Parents bought daughters organs. Why? I can tell you. And and uh, and so she played it for a hot minute, and literally a hot minute. I think before the holidays was over, she had left it alone. And so, I started fooling around with it. But the songs I was learning was, it came with a songbook, were songs that I knew from in school. And I'm really, really dating myself. Every elementary school that when you were in elementary school, you had a music class or a music session or during the week. And you sang songs out of a song, I guess a songbook along with the record. And one of the ones that I remember distinctly learning was Big Rock Candy Mountain on an organ, you know. And
Right.
and so, and from there, I got interested into music, and I'm gonna lead up to when I first picked up guitar, and then I'll stop. And then after that, got into what grade was I in? Probably the fourth grade, 9 years, around that 9 years old, around the time they introduced you to a musical instrument. They did the recorder, that woodwind thing, uh, you know, not great, didn't thrill me. But every young guy or boy wanted to learn to play the clarinet. Clarinet was a hot instrument in my neighborhood. You wanted to learn how to play the clarinet. Man, if I didn't love music, I would have probably stopped doing music right then and there. Um, the teacher's name was the music teacher was Mr. Monroe, black guy, and he had the patience of
Of a saint.
no, he had the patience of boiling water. Okay, boiling over a pot.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
My bad.
short, very short. And I could not hold the mouthpiece right for the reed because it's a reed instrument. I cannot hold it right to even make it sound. Only thing it sounded like was wind or air blowing through it. If you don't hold it right, that's what it's going to sound like. No tone or anything. Bro, man, snatched that clarinet out of my hand. And he said, pick another instrument. Man, I didn't know what to pick. So then I picked the flute. And that was my first, as far as formal music, learning music formally, was the flute. And did it for like from fourth grade to probably eighth grade. So for 4 years, I played the flute, got pretty good at it, don't ask me to play it now, because I probably suck. But that's it, So then, this is around, and the change came because, like I said, middle school, um, uh, what song was that? Go For Your Guns, Isley Brothers.
Isley Brothers.
Bad album. That's all and like I said, I'm gonna go into their album. If you people want to listen to it, they Google it, whatever. That had some of the most notable classic hits on that album. And then I said, went to a place called Consumer Distributors, and there was allowance money. No, take that back. It was, and I think I had earned that money. I think it was. I think I did earn it because I was working at, underage though, working at our local grocery store with an Italian guy who only had daughters. So, he took a shining to me. I would just work with him on the weekends and he would give me a little something. I saved my money. And I bought my first guitar, no name brand, 6-string guitar from Consumer Distributors. I guess you could equate that to I don't know what you could equate it to. Uh, Not even to a Walmart. I mean, it was really a warehouse, catalog type warehouse purchase. So, I bought that, bought me a little amp, and and tried to teach myself. Bought the music book, tried to teach myself. Learned bar chords. That was cool. That was straightforward, easy, and so forth. Learn major seventh position. 'Cause that's like a steer. Because people know how the format on a guitar. I'm talking about that's like a stair step, a type position. And then I started figuring out what minor chords were and so forth. And then I heard Louis Johnson, Strawberry Letter 23. And I said, what? And it was a simple bass line. That's the sad part, but it didn't sound simple. It was just the tone and everything about it was like, man. I said, what? I didn't say, who is that? I said, what is that? And next thing I knew, and I said, later for a guitar and picked up the bass. And then I'm going to stop there because I don't want to go into high school bands and so forth. I'm just going to stop right there for me. But that's that's how I really got my inception into music for the most part.
Yeah, I see some parallels and some similarities as well. I remember way back in the late 60s, early 70s, my first introduction to music commercially was listening to, and you remember the station because Stanford is close enough to New York City, listening to WABC AM, which is out of New York. That was a pop music station. So considering that, we're out and about with the family all the time, it wasn't the news station or similar station where my father really used to like to listen to the baseball games and stuff. If any music station was playing, it was WABC on the radio. So I grew up listening to all the white pop hits, and from Yes to Simon and Garfunkel to the Carpenters, all that stuff growing up in the late 60s, early 70s is what I was listening to. Now, in terms of at home, it was a mix of, since my parents are from Jamaica, it was a mix of Caribbean music, Jamaican music, as well as contemporary current black music, which you referred to one of the biggest stars back then was James Brown, Joe Tex, just about everybody that was in Motown. We had a mix of 45s and 33s or albums in the house. So basically, from a commercial standpoint, it was always pop music, WABC, because as you said, FM wasn't really around at that particular time. So pop music, rolling around outside, going places with the family, but indoors it was more so Motown, black music, Caribbean music. But then the influences started to come through American Bandstand and Soul Train.
Let me ask you a question, because it made me reminisce about when you mentioned about some of the pop artists, and I just kind of just kept that void out of there. Do you remember listening to Janis Joplin?
Yeah, Janis Joplin. She's folk, more country, but that spanned the whole rainbow of the stuff that I was listening to on the radio in the first early days, and I had to be like 8, 9, 10, 11 years old.
I remember that song.
So I definitely remember that.
Yeah, I remember that song that she did. Because my older sister used to sing it all the time. Oh Lord, won't you buy a Mercedes Benz?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, back then in grammar school, there was always music classes you had to take, and you ended up at some point picking your instrument that you had to learn, took that home, and you kept it for the whole school year.
Right.
And, depending on that instrument, sometimes you even ended up joining the band. But in my case, the first introduction to any instrument I had outside of the recorder, like you said, which everybody had to learn as a child in school. But the first instrument that I picked to take home was the trumpet. And I still remember in the 5th grade, that was my first instrument I picked up. I still remember the smell of that trumpet. And I practiced and tried to do what I need to do in terms of learning it for probably about a month. I said later for this. And at that point, from fifth grade on, upward, I should say, it was just about listening to music on the radio, watching American Bandstand, watching Soul Train. I think there was, around that time, there was a show that was similar to Soul Train called Soul Alive on WPIX, Channel 11 in New York City.
Wow, man.
So you watch that, and you got to see not only the songs that were on the radio, but you actually got to see the artists performing them.
Right.
So at some point, after watching all of that, and decided I wasn't going to try piano, and I definitely wasn't going to mess with trumpet. After watching so many bands on there, I said, that's pretty cool to be in a band. I wonder what instrument I would play. And I knew it wasn't going to be the drums because my parents weren't going to have that. There was going to be no loud drum set in the house. But as I began to watch the bands and specifically the black bands that were playing and stuff, I'm like, you know what? It would definitely be cool to play the guitar because it looks like all the girls like guitar players. So I ended up gravitating toward that. There was one Christmas that my parents had bought a little 4-string ukulele for not me, but my brother, and he was very young at that point. We had it around the house a little while, and he was old enough to pick it up and play it to the point where he broke the strings. And he quickly forgot about it. So I took it upon myself to fix that particular broken string, and I started playing around with it at the same time that I started saying, it might be cool to pick up an instrument because, like I said, these guitarists they look pretty cool to me. So I finally decided to ask my dad if he could buy me a guitar. And at the time, there were no big music stores like we have now that were in my city anyway. Mm-hmm. But there was a record store in Orange, New Jersey on Main Street that we used to go to all the time. And when I was old enough to catch the bus and I had some money in my pocket, I would go there and buy 45s. At some point, they started selling these cheap guitars and amplifiers, and they had them hanging up on the wall. And I walked in there one day and checked it out. At the same time, I was really thinking about what it would be like to be a musician. And it was, I still remember it because I actually have a picture of it, not the actual guitar, but I found it online. It was what we called a Sakova electric guitar. It was sunburst and had some gold overlay leafing on the pick guard, real super cheap pickups. Mm-hmm. And accompanied with that guitar came a little tiny amplifier that had like an 8-inch speaker. If you turned it up too much, it would distort. Mm-hmm. So I begged him to give me the guitar. I for some reason, I'm saying at that time, which was in the early 70s, I don't think both of them cost any more than like $90, maybe close to like $80 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I came home, I was still watching Soul Train and watching these musicians and stuff. And I just taught myself guitar to the point where, I lived in a neighborhood with a lot of kids. Matter of fact, 3 generations of kids. So we did what most kids that you see these days don't do. We were always outside playing. Mm-hmm. But I remember my friends would come knock on the door and say, "You want to come outside?" I said, "No, I'm in here learning these songs off the radio and learning guitar and stuff like that." And I was so into it that I would spend a lot of my time sitting down learning guitar. And that's how I pretty much started learning guitar. And what ended up happening was there was a couple guys in the neighborhood that we all lived close to each other. We ended up forming a band around the time I was 14 years old. My next door neighbor, he ended up buying the same type of guitar I had, same make and model, even looked the same, but it was bass. The guy down the street, Craig, was a drummer, so he had a drum set already. Tony was up the street and he played trumpet. So these guys were just 1 or 2 years younger than me. So I was the oldest guy, and I ended up being the band leader. We never had a keyboardist after a long time, but at some point through high school, we ended up with a 4-part horn section. So through all that time, I remember the very first song I learned to play commercially was Love Roller Coaster, learning that rhythm. But that's pretty much how I began to get not into just listening, to pop and R&B, but actually beginning to play it as a musician.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
glad you kind of mentioned that because for me, I had a similar journey. Mine was vocally though, not
Right.
well, yeah, 'cause you know where I'm going with this, right? Because
Yes, sir.
because you kind of like I said, I left that out because I wanted to focus more so on the instrument as far as musically goes.
Right.
I really didn't start singing until, I mean, when I say singing, I'm not really singing until I was, yeah, about 9 years old, 9 years old. And, and like you said, you
That's
listen
pretty
to,
early.
yeah, I know, but here's the thing, you listen to, like I said, I was enamored with the Motown sound. I'll be telling you. I mean, I wanted to know every part of it. And like I said, I used to listen to A and B, C, A side and B side. And uh, I would destroy records, and how I would destroy them is that I would, because needles back then were unforgivable if you lifted it off the record and put it back on in a certain spot you're trying to catch it on. You hear it and whatever. And
Right.
I would write down every ooh and all the lyrical content, every ooh and ah of what the artist was doing, from Temptations. I'm going to because they were older to the Kitty Pop. I call it that way. Jackson 5 to the Miracles to Four Tops to the Spinners, all of that. And so I started singing. I started singing along, and so I guess my mom caught on to it, listening to it. And so one time she had me come into to sing for some of her friends, and I was kind of reluctant, but they each gave me a quarter. Now back there in the day, Doug, a quarter was a lot of money, you know, and you figure
You ran to the candy store and picked up some now and laters, man. Come
Nick
on.
now later, those squirrel nuts, some 5 cents, 5 cent chips in a bag
Man, everything was 5 cents, bro.
yep, without the air in them and everything. And then I started singing, and so then well, you know what? And then they had me sing a Jackson 5 tune. What's Jackson 5 tune was that? It might have been the love, it might have been ABC, not Love You Say, it might have been ABC. And I did it, and it was like they loved it. They were astounded because you're a kid, you're 9 years old, your voice has not changed. And I could and basically because I was say self-taught, self-studying how Motown was grooming their recording artists of how to sing. A lot of people don't know that Motown groomed the recording artists of how they wanted to sing. And you know, and I and that's when I started singing. I mean, really. And like I said, writing down every lyrical content and everything. And then that stemmed to and I'm not the greatest artist, but I used to write. I'm an artist when drawing goes. I used to draw big bands because back then, Doug, you and I both know big bands were the thing. Like you mentioned about like the Ohio Players roller coaster, Earth, Wind and Fire.
Right.
Who else were big bands? Barcades.
Barcades, mass production,
Yeah, Mass Production.
brass construction, BT Express.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, big. They had at least as far as the personnel of at least six or more, easily. And
Long time ago, exactly.
big time. And and basically, so you fell in love with that part of the music. And like you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned that. It was like uh uh dream one day of doing exactly that for a living,
Right, exactly.
I'll say being not just a musician, but an entertainer. And when I say entertainer, I'm going to because I didn't know these guys weren't writing their own stuff, because you're young, you don't know that they're not writing that stuff and everything.
Right, right,
But then,
right.
you as you mentioned, Doug, as you get older and you learning how to play other people's music, slowly you morph into trying to do it. You do your own. You do your own, and you do mimic. Like you and I both know. We're gonna talk about that later in a later part of the series. about emulating other artists and everything. But you know, that's uh uh I just wanted to add that tidbit to it and everything. That's about it. Well,
Yeah, yeah, no, I get that exactly. And I've never considered myself a singer.
uh
Still don't. But in
right.
terms of emulating what you had to do, even if you were doing your own material at some point, which and we doing after we, you know, attained position proficiency, for lack of a better phrase, you have to sing, you know, because the stuff that you were covering, they weren't all instrumentals. Now we had a number of instrumentals, probably more than not, because we weren't singing to begin with, but you hone your craft by emulating and you sing the best that you can. I ended up singing fast forward to, you know, high school senior, I ended up singing lead on one or two songs, but
Mhm.
again, that's definitely not my best nor my strength. However, yeah, it all comes from emulation. As you said later, Dan, we're going to talk about the path we took in that specific area after we got to college and started writing together. So we've got a couple stories to tell about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
But yeah, that's definitely those are definitely the beginnings of how both Dan and I got into again our introduction to music from daily life as well as choosing the path of becoming musicians.
right, for sure. Yeah. Well, you know that's all. I think I wanted to stop right there. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good start because what I was thinking as we were discussing it, we kind of touched on the band stuff and
Mhm.
whether we actually played in high school bands of some sort or actually our own bands. I think that'll be a good place to pick up next time because I think from what I remember, both of you and I have done that on, if not one, both extents.
Right.
So I think we've got some things to talk about regarding that as well.
Oh yeah, and especially and some of the influences in some of the most unlikely places like uh the Cosby the Bill what was no Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids.
Right,
And
right,
their
right. Oh
junk
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
their junkyard band. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I remember more so the musical numbers from that cartoon show than anything else. You know, you know.
Yeah, you got me thinking actually, to kind of piggyback on that a little bit,
Uh-huh.
cartoons and bands, you know, you obviously had Jackson 5, they had their show.
Yeah, you had the Archies.
You know, the Archies they had a band team in there too.
Uh-huh.
Just the competition to the Jacksons, the Osmonds,
The Osmonds, they
they
had
had a
that song.
cartoon show as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the live action Partridge Family, they were a band.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Josie and the Pussycats,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Band thing
Yeah.
going on too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So but again, we're talking that era where bands were front and foremost. So
Oh
you
yeah.
found them at a lot of culture, American culture. So yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think I think we'll have some interesting discussion on the next episode about, you know, what we were doing as we began to grow as musicians and finding our own creativity, and not just from a personal standpoint, but playing with bands as
Oh
well.
yeah.
So that should be a good kickoff for the next episode.
Definitely. Yep. All right.
Sounds good. So
Okay.
we'll wrap it up. And for those who tuned in and listened, we thank you for listening to the very first early parts of how A6P came together. Definitely appreciate the time taken.
Yes. Yep. And just want to add a tidbit for in future series, we may have some invited guests. Not going to say who they may or may
Oh
not.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but we may
Definitely.
definitely have some invited.
We should have some. We should have some people dialing in. One who has particularly, we hoping that we can make this connection. Who has done very well in the music industry, and actually this person is younger than Dan and I, but also played a crucial role in what A6P AfterSix Productions was doing at one point.
Yes.
But little did we know that he would end up cold blowing up in the R&B industry. So yeah, we hope to get him on as well.
Yep, for sure. All right.
All right, Chief, sounds good. We'll go ahead and wrap up this episode, and we'll go ahead and prepare for the next one.
All right, sounds good. All right, Doug. Okay.
All right, talk to you later, man.
All right, talk to you later.